and a brand new deck of Norse tarot cards. How about that?
All right, well, I'm going to need some help. I came close last week, Tom. Close on the FanDuel. It was only my second time doing the FanDuel. Actually, third time, I think. But I came in 103rd out of 6,000 something people. And all because I picked Ortega. Wow. I knew Ortega was going to win that main event. I just knew it. And it was beautiful. One of the most... I mean, usually I don't say that about 5-round fights. And I was kind of wondering why he wasn't more aggressive. But at the same time, you have to look at the total damage done in the end. And, you know, it's amazing he didn't knock him out with that spinning back elbow.
Well, yeah, that would be... Well, I guess, to me, that would be... Why change success?
Yeah.
I mean, it was and I think what happened, the zombie just couldn't adjust. This was a stand-up game from Ortega we'd never seen. And I know before, you know, I'd seen enough of the embeddeds, and he was trading, you know, with one of his, I guess, in a garage. With, you know, maybe a good boxing trainer, but it didn't seem like the stand-up game had evolved anywhere near his jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So I think he made the changes there, and it showed. I mean, I kept thinking, wow. I mean, the zombie's got to get something accomplished, and it just had to be a nightmare fight for him, because I don't think he was prepared for anything like that. The kicks were effective. I mean,
apparently he had the Junior Dos Santos effect on him, because he actually reported the next day that he didn't remember the last 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how bad Ortega
outstruck
him.
Yeah, and that's not a bad sign. I mean, it's a terrible sign.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, but so Ortega really, you know, there was a lot of talk after that almost 2-year layoff, but
he didn't look very rusty to me. He looked really sharp. And,
you know, what's that old cliche? There's one of 2 ways to handle a defeat. You can allow it to destroy your career, or you just look very analytically and say, okay, here's what I need to fix, and look at it like an engineering problem. And that's what Ortega did. My God, what a beatdown.
One of the things that I could definitely, if I had Chan Sung Jung, the Korean zombie, in the room, and I could lecture him a little bit on that fight, I would tell him, number 1, don't ever let him see you sweat or bleed. You know, don't ever let him think that you're hurt. The instant Ortega saw him snorting because his nose was messed up, and when he saw him touching the blood and looking at it, touching the blood and looking at it, touching the blood and looking at it, I mean, don't do that.
Yeah, that was...
He's in your head already. Don't do it, you know?
And then, wouldn't you think, Rich, by the 3rd round, the zombie's body language was just discouraged.
Yeah.
I just think it...
Well, he was just... I mean, his whole face was getting battered.
Right.
And it started to show towards the end, but, I mean, he got his nose messed up, and he was snorting, huffing and puffing, and, you know, that's the last thing they tell you to do, because if you have a broken nose and you keep snorting, it's going to swell right the hell up. Thankfully, on his part, it didn't, but... I mean, so he can tell right away. Then the eye issue was going on, and he literally, like, touched the blood, looked at it, and he was still fighting. Don't worry about whether you're bleeding or not. And it was like after the 3rd time, you should know, that is blood. That's not sweat. Yeah. So forget about it. Move on. I know it's, you know, in the moment, he probably didn't even realize what he was doing, but... That to me was like, oh, geez, this guy is not going to win this fight. He is done.
Right. I mean, it's the correct attitude, and I think Tyson said something like this once: "F it, it's a fight." Well, okay. I mean, and I know from my experience back in my my early Golden Gun stuff, and I got hit with it was going into the 3rd round, and I had to fight one. Right. I know I did. But this other guy was a bigger puncher, and I figured, I figured I could try to pull a Billy Conn on him, with the sense of that. And I was going, he can't be an idiot. And And he landed so hard with the left hook that I was seeing double.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, where's all this blood coming from?
Right.
I mean, with all the sweat, I mean, swell, looked down, it was all blood. But I wanted to keep going. I mean, okay, come on, let's go. But the referee just, you're done. And a few weeks later, I formed a big abscess in my nose, had to have surgery. So I guess it had to be stopped. But the point being that it's just kind of instinct. And when he did that with the blood in the eye, I mean, I really didn't care who won.
Yeah.
Kind of, I'm sort of a fan of both guys, so I didn't have that kind of, real adrenaline going for me. But it's like, what are you doing?
You don't want to show them that you're messed up, like that. Like you're that concerned. Like, I think he was like thinking he was so perfect at this point that he couldn't possibly be busted up. Like, he thought he was in an alternate reality there for a second. Like, I am bleeding? So it's impossible.
Yeah. This is a fight.
Yeah.
If you're that concerned about it, there's plenty of other sporting activities.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other activities in life. And I'm sure you've seen this too in some of your training. We've had guys come into strong style and they would observe just 1/2 hour what's going on. No, it's not for me. Or just maybe, stick around for a few weeks and say, no, this is just not for me. And there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But, I mean, and again, I don't know what he was feeling. I mean, because I'd like to talk about the Loma situation a little bit, too. When that would apply there, too. I'm very hesitant to criticize someone there, and they're taking it. I'm not. But, yeah, that was just with the zombie. He's just got to start from scratch. I mean, that was as much of a mental beat down as it was a physical one.
Well, we only got a couple more UFC fights here to talk about as far as the last week's fights. And then, of course, we're going to talk about this week's fights. And I guess we'll chip in a little bit on the Lomachenko thing, because you got some stuff on Julie Letterman. I didn't actually stick around for the reading of the scores, because I watched it on the replay. But, yeah, so we talked a little bit about it already with Tony, but, we'll get your opinion on it, too. But anyway, Jessica Andrade, she was also on my fight card for the FanDuel 103rd place position. She pretty much took care of business against Caitlin Chukagian. Just 5 seconds left in the round. She smelled blood and she just pummeled her. And
lots of finishes on that card.
And she looked like she was outclassed for like the first 30 seconds. She couldn't get her range, and then she just did what I called her with Tony. I actually talked about this fight a little bit. I called her the female version of Vinnie Paz as an MMA fighter, because she don't let her reach worry her, and that's the reason why I picked her on the card. And she delivered. Jimmy Crute, I didn't get to see this knockout of Modestus Bukauskas there, but only took 2 minutes and 1 second. Knocked him out with punches. And then also...
that was pretty brutal. That way he was really put himself on the map.
Also, usually it comes back to bite me.
But great show.
When I go for, a pick with FanDuel of somebody that is like on the Patriots, or somebody like this guy, James Krause, who we've interviewed before. But since he had all the news about being such a good coach, I went with James Krause, and the James Krause, I should say. He delivered as well against Claudio Silva, unanimous decision win, and scored a lot of points. He was very technical, kept his range. Very poor defense, though, I got to say. He definitely could improve his defense, and that was really his only weakness. But otherwise, seems like he was in a little bit better shape, and had just enough experience to win that one. And then we had Jonathan Martinez, we talked about last week on the show, being the Street Fighter. So of course, hearing that, I say, yeah, I got to bet on him, and he was very dynamic. He looked very good. He was landing a lot of just unusual strikes and stuff like that, a lot of kicks and back fists and stuff. Just was really good all around. And that was pretty much it. But the very first fight of the night, I gotta say, was the big letdown for me. I should have known better than to bet against Nurmagomedov. But Mark Striegel, if he had only gone to decision and lost, I probably still would have won the whole thing. But no, he got knocked out in 51 seconds. The worst performance on the entire card. And I had that. It was my one mistake. But it was funny because I wasn't in the points for the whole entire card. And then as soon as the main event ended, I was 103rd. I wasn't even going to win any money.
That's got to be yeah.
So
that's frustrating.
So if we ever get Mark Striegel on the show, I'm going to have to say, hey, buddy, I hope you know you cost me $10,000.
Thanks for nothing.
Yeah. I know you could probably kick my ass, but I got to tell you. No, anyway.
I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was giving it 100%.
Yeah.
That's why I'm very reluctant to criticize. I mean,
he fought a Nurmagomedov. What can you do?
Steps up has my respect.
What can you do? He fought a Nurmagomedov. Anyway, we won't get into too much of the details, but Lomachenko, Lopez, I did get to watch some of it on the replay the other night. I was clicking back and forth, and I definitely liked what I saw out of Lopez, and I told Tony this, that I think more than anything, even though it's usually sort of his game plan to be cautious in the beginning, I think he was more intimidated in this fight by the size of his opponent, because the shoulders and the biceps on Lopez were just gigantic for that weight.
Also, it could have been the speed.
Yeah.
Not just the size.
He had a really sharp jab going.
Because the whole plan was, okay, let's get recalibrated, give away the first couple rounds, and then we'll just come on. This guy's going to run out of gas. And for the first 6 rounds, I was trying to determine, and maybe it was a combination of both. Maybe it was strategy, and maybe, again, I don't know what Loma was feeling, but maybe it could have been, he gets a lot harder than I thought.
Yeah.
Because it just, and I knew after 6 rounds, he was in a lot of trouble. I mean, I think I had it on 5-1 at that point. But you could easily say it was a shutout. So, I mean, Loma just had to really pour it on. And at times he did, but you've got to give Lopez credit. And Lopez had said before, he said, everyone looks at my power, but there's other things I could do.
Yeah.
And I didn't dispute that, but I just said, we haven't seen it yet. We did. We did.
Yes, we did.
I mean, he showed a high fight IQ in that whole fight. I mean, it was just he had the speed, and it just seemed. Now, Loma, of course, said there was maybe a shoulder issue, but so I don't know how you scored it. I mean, I watched it live, and I wanted to go with the draw, but I just had to go 7-5 Lopez. I mean, I think Loma really came on, but the right guy won. But 119 to 109.
Oh yeah.
Really.
I think
so now, in addition to being birded, now you could be Letterman. God, and it just seems like it's such a great position to be in. I mean, if half of my tax clients were audited and went to jail, I think I'd be out of business pretty quick. I mean, how about a plumber that can't get a sink to a drain?
Yeah.
How about an electrician that burns homes now? There's nothing like this. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. Now, I don't know how much pull Bob Arum has, so I'm just not sure how that works, but I have to think he still has some.
Yeah.
And he said he's really going to put the heat on not to have her, but then Adelaide Bird was on one of the prelim things. So it appears there's no consequence to this.
Nope.
None. I hate to get on a soapbox about that, but it just, and I'm sure even Lopez knew deep down inside he didn't win in 11 rounds.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I talked about with Tony, that he did, one thing he did wrong was he had very poor defense on that, up jab side. even though the up jab was working for him tremendously because he really knows the difference between the power jab and the speed jab, the quick jab, and he uses it well. The big thing is you have to use that as a defensive weapon too. You have to be able to move that up to your chin and deflect a punch or catch a punch, and he was leaving the whole side of his face open to an attack. That was the only place where he was banged up too, if you notice at the end of the fight. And there's some guys that have that style. Usually they're Latino or Mexican, but he mixes in some other styles too. Like I saw him using the George Foreman defense with the crossed elbows, elbows sticking out, crossed arms, and that worked for him for a little while. But and the Floyd Mayweather type up jab, he was trying to use it, but Floyd makes it work for him defensively by ducking under that shoulder somehow, and he sticks that shoulder way up and leans back. And there was none of that from Lopez. He was just using it because he's either used to that style or he's grown up with it or whatever, but to use it effectively, you really have to think about defense more. You have to get that shoulder up. You have to either use that jab even more than he was using it, which seems impossible. But I mean, you could just flick that quick jab out there a little bit more and make it work defensively too. But that was his big mistake. He just wasn't even picking up his hand from underneath his chin to try to deflect any of that. He was trying to use his right hand to do all his defense. And you can do that to a limited extent at range, but when you get in close, you can't rely on just that one hand. So that was the only knock, but otherwise I thought he did fantastic. I didn't really watch too much of the late rounds, though, so I didn't see him get beat up till the end.
But then he has to come on, though, at the end.
Yeah.
In all the post-fight stuff. Oh, I exposed him. He was a nobody. Again, this is such weird psychology.
Yeah.
Weird psychology. I mean, I don't know how you felt, Rich, when you were fighting. I'd always want people to think I'm going up against King Kong.
Yeah.
And if I win, oh, man, that was rough, and, the guy was a badass, and all that. But this whole disparaging your opponent after you beat him up, you just take yourself down a notch or two.
Yeah, exactly.
And all these fans were terrible about that with Frazier.
Right.
They always, Frazier's a nobody. Well, and I used to argue with these guys, well, the Frazier's a nobody. But what does that make Muhammad? I mean, that just knocks your guy down. And I heard some of that. And as far as the future for both of them, one's moving up. I kind of like to see Lopez, as big as he is, do what Duran did. Jump over 140, go right to welterweight. That's where the action is. Yeah. What do you think of that?
Hell yeah. Why not?
I mean, because I don't have to tell you how stacked that division is. And
also, one thing I told Tony about that fight that amazed me was I don't think I've ever seen anybody with the ability, probably because of how big his arms were, but the ability to throw body shots without changing levels, standing straight up and throw these body shots that looked like they were going to break a rib.
Yeah.
And just be able to even stay at range, too. He was able to just dip down and just wham! Throw in those hooks to the ribs like crazy. And I've never seen anybody do that without bending their knees and coming down, like the proper way you're taught. But, unorthodox things like in MMA can win boxing matches. So
yeah.
That's one of those things I like.
So
I like that ability.
About a rematch? Well, what about a rematch between the two of them? Do you see that happening?
I think Lopez will want it more than Lomachenko, but I think Lomachenko had him shook. If it was a 15-round fight, Lomachenko might have won. So,
yeah.
It could be sold.
Right now, it seems like that's the opposite. That's the opposite consensus because Lopez, and especially his dad's fiery. But Lopez is saying no rematch in this one.
Yeah.
And Loma was, he really would like a rematch. So
he'll have to earn it. He'll have to get some belts.
I think, well, that's the thing, too. I mean, that's like Costa claiming for a rematch with Desanya. Well, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to get back in and just get back on a winning streak. It's not that simple. But, yeah, it seems like Loma would like a rematch, but I think he went wrong. I mean, he's going to have to get it in gear earlier on and then just take a chance of going into those big guns. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah.
But what else can he do? You tell me what else he could do.
Yeah.
Man, it was just really
kind of like the Khabib Nurmagomedov situation. He doesn't want a rematch with Conor anymore, but pretty much thinks he beat the hell out of him enough. He's got to earn it, that's what he says. But anyway, speaking of that, we got to talk about the big one at Fight Island here. It could be one of Khabib's last. Just lost his father. Coronavirus actually got him. Believe it or not, fact is stranger than fiction. But yeah, Khabib is going in here not only undefeated, but just dominant in his division. Justin Gaethje's going in there with not only a puncher's chance, but if you watch the pre-fight stuff, the wrestling base, that might be his ability to be able to stuff the takedowns from Khabib. Now, there's been a lot of people that have tried that and failed, but Justin Gaethje has a pretty intense wrestling base. Yeah. So.
Right, and he'll keep the pressure there. This armbar last. I would just say Khabib is there's no blueprint to beat him, and until he's beaten, he has to be a slight favorite.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I would not be shocked if the upset would happen. I wouldn't be shocked.
Nope. Well, I got dueling teams.
I just watched.
I got dueling teams on FanDuel. One of them's got Khabib winning in the main event, the MVP slot. The other one's got Justin. So that's a toss-up for me. I really like the ability or the potential for Gaethje to knock him out within 4. But he has to be prepared for it to go deep. I don't think it's going to happen 1, 2, or 3. He's going to have to, not only hang with Khabib for long enough to get him tired enough to, get drawn into the stand-up, basically, rather than keep trying to wrestle. Because I think that's what he'll do. He'll just try to grapple and, not get in any submissions and throw every punch he can while holding on to him. And it's going to be just nuts back and forth for those first 3 rounds. And then he's going to get that chance. Well, Khabib is just going to stand up with him and just forget that that's his strength. And it's going to be the end of him. That's my crystal ball prediction. That's
Gaethje is real. I just watched UFC embedded the 4th one. Watching this before we started talking, and he just seemed so relaxed, just a very quiet confidence, just like Khabib. They're kind of mirror images mentally. Khabib's never had any kind of mental weakness that I could determine. He's just very confident, not cocky, but he's all business. And so far, they were asking questions, and Khabib was saying that he feels the longer the fight goes, gas out before he will.
Yeah.
So one of the reporters asked that to Gaethje, and he says, of course he has a right to feel that way. He feels he's better in all ways. He's undefeated, and it's Gaethje's job just to go in and show him, no, I'm not going to get tired. I'm going to go. So this is a good one to look forward to.
Yeah, and then, of course, the clip they keep playing of when he won the interim belt, and Justin just tosses it aside. And they're like, why'd you just show your belt? And he's just like, because I want the real one.
Yeah. Well, there's one of 2 ways you can look at that. But, for him to have achieved what he's achieved, I'd say to anyone at that level, however you want to deal with it, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
You heard that right. If you don't like it, fine.
Well, it's going to be a hell of a fight. I don't think it's going to be a quick knockout. Justin is great, but
no,
I just don't think Khabib has been punched before. He's been thrown around. He's going to make it a wrestling match for as long as he can, but I just think he's going to get dragged into the muck. And Gaethje, if he has a chance, is going to be the fourth, maybe, possibly early 5th. But I think it's going to be a knockout if he wins. Now, if Khabib wins, it's going the full distance. Unless he gets a miracle choke somewhere, rear naked choke somehow, because he busts Justin down that bad. But I see him being more competitive with the wrestling. I think he's going to think farther enough ahead to know that he's probably got to have every single wrestler in camp that could possibly duplicate Khabib style, or teach him how to beat Khabib style and how to do takedown defense against it and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's going to be an absolute war. This is, on paper, it's a good fight. Just, just looking at it with all the previews.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I mean, sometimes you never know till they get in there. But Gaethje's just on a roll right now. He's got the wind at his back. He's in a good place with his coach. Coming off that astonishing win against Tony. I mean, he was the underdog there. I mean, I wasn't shocked that Justin won that, but the way he did it.
Right.
Nobody hit this man on Ferguson in years, ever, in his career like that. So he's very confident. He's just where he needs to be. So, and then we'll see. I mean, Khabib is so far, there's no blueprint, but we'll see if everything's adding up with him.
And then we have
it seems like he's ready to go.
Match number 11, the co-main event. Robert Whittaker, 21-5 against Jared Cannonier, who's 13-4. A lot of people would say, well, obviously Robert has the experience factor. You might say that. But he's had some rough experience of late. Last fight he won to get his head cut open at the end. It looked really sloppy. Jared, on the other hand, has been moving down in weight rather than up. And the further down he goes, the better he looks. He was knocking guys out at heavyweight. That's fascinating. And I like this guy. He's actually a favorite on the FanDuel, so he's more expensive than Robert Whittaker, and I think it's for a reason. I thought it was funny on the shows beforehand. What do they call it? Embedded or All Access? They don't call it All Access. That's Showtime. The Embedded, where he's talking about his crystals and everything. He's got them all laid out.
Yeah, he's kind of a black job. I can relate to that,
More power to you.
Yeah, and he seems like a very low key, friendly personality. I mean, so he can easily be a fan favorite. Maybe he'll be too low key to be a superstar, but maybe he'll just be like Steve and let his fist do the talking. So
I like him in that.
I have to think. I mean, I would never count. Yeah, I would never count Whittaker out.
No.
But think if Whittaker gets, well, he's got to get a win. Yeah. I mean, when you're the former champ, imagine having that burden on you, former champ.
Yeah.
Well, you're expected to win every fight you're in until you get your title back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's a big burden, and then if all of a sudden, if he doesn't really perform, I mean, I guess he could survive a close decision or something, but if Cannonier gets him quick, wow, they'll be lining up. So for Whittaker, this is saving it, in my opinion. I mean, I know you're not as good as your last fight, but I'm telling you, that it means something for former champ.
Well, to win my $10,000, it's got to be Cannonier.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my money on him because Whittaker has had more rough fights than easy ones of late, and Jared tends to go out blazing. And I think Whittaker is susceptible to that kind of attack, and it's going to be too much for him. I could be wrong. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I liked what I saw on the Embedded episode, and the next one is a little bit more difficult for me. I do like Alexander because of his vast experience difference, but I also like Walt because he recently had that tragedy where his niece was killed, and he's got a lot to fight for, and he's just a big, tough guy. So they both have 8 losses, but I think Volkov is on a little bit more of a recent tear, so I'm heavily leaning toward Volkov, but I don't have him on both lineups. I went with a couple different lineups, with Gaethje being leading one and Khabib leading the other one. Khabib's the most expensive fighter there is on the freaking list, so you gotta work around him by making some cheaper picks. But anyway, I like Volkov. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think he's just a little better technically.
Yeah.
I think Harris has got all the heart in the world, but he's just been a little short. So.
Anyway, Phil Hawes 8-2 against Jacob Malkoon. On paper, you think Phil would have the experience factor there by a lot, but he does have the 2 losses, so we don't know. I don't know about that one. That's kind of a toss-up. My name is Lauren Murphy in the 8th fight of the night.
Boy, that was classic.
13-4, fighting Lilia Shakarova, who's 8-1. The kicker on that one was when Daniel Cormier introduced her wrong after her fight when she won. My name is Laura. It's funny. Anyway, Lilia Shakarova, she's 8-1. Murphy 13-4. That ought to be a barn burner. I didn't really factor that into either of my card picks. Some of the female fights are a little bit hard to predict.
That's all. Almost flip a coin.
Yeah. Probably going to be a decision fight too. When on the earlier fights on the card, you want to go for knockouts. You want to pick who's going to get the knockout. So anyway, Magomed Ankalaev against Ion Cutelaba. That's another one I stayed away from. Ankalaev looks like he's got the better winning percentage, but Cutelaba is a journeyman. You know, he's been around the block a few times. He's been in a few big fights. So Ankalaev is favored, I believe, but Cutelaba could win that one. So I really didn't want to risk picking one way or the other on that one. Then we have Stefan Struve. He has a whopping 12 losses, but he also has a whopping 29 wins. Tai Tuivasa is like a Mark Hunt style fighter. He's 9-3, but he just if he gets close enough and he touches your chin, and it's been done to Struve before. He's had his chin pretty much knocked off his face by Mark Hunt. So. This could get interesting, but I don't know. I think Struve has learned his lesson. I think he's going to take this one.
Struve is one of Stipe's 3 losses.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? That was back in 2012, fall of 2012.
Yeah.
And, Stipe was coming off a win against Beltran, I think.
It's never pretty, it seems, when Struve wins, but he does have the capability of using that reach, and he's another one of those people like Czech Congo that you'd think, with that kind of reach and strength and ability and height, I mean, he would be so dynamic. Nobody could stop him, but he just doesn't put it all together.
Well,
he doesn't have it.
Well, and again, he's so tall.
Yeah.
You notice that guys that tall are gangly. I mean, they do have some coordination problems. I mean, it's all relative. A lot more coordinated than men in the street. But you get my point on that. He's up against guys that are a little more efficient. Those limbs are. It's hard. I've noticed that with big, tall guys. So, that is a tough one. I go back and forth on that. But if we look at quality of opposition, I guess we'd have to give Struve a bit of a... and again, I haven't seen the Hunt-alike record. But Struve would probably... What are the odds makers saying on that?
I think Struve is a heavy favorite on FanDuel, and they're actually also the sports book up here in New Hampshire. They also pretty much run all the state's sportsbook activities. So,
are we talking like 3-1, 4-1, or?
I don't know the exact odds, but I think
500 or
like, for example, like Tai Tuivasa is in the $14 to $15 range, and Stefan Struve's up there at $17. And you have like so many dollars to draft your team. So, like the highest player or fighter is at like $22 to $24. So that tells you how low he is on the totem pole. And believe it or not, one of the fighters here that we interviewed before is the least expensive fighter of the night. But if you're going to have to pick a loser to have the number one $24 fighter on the card, you're going to go with this guy because he's probably guaranteed to go 3 rounds. The only time I didn't see him go 3 rounds and even, go get the loss was when he really screwed up his ankle early in the fight. The guy kicked him just right. And he just had a horrible go of it, and then he finally got TKO'd. But Sam Alvey, coming in at 33 and 14. And he's got a lot of experience, a lot of the smaller leagues before he came to the UFC, but he's always coming up on the radar here in the UFC. He just comes out of nowhere, and he's on the fight card. And here he is against Da Un Young, who was up there in the top 20s, the $20 range of the FanDuel cards. He is 13 and 2, has a lot of knockouts, and he's obviously favored here. So Sam Alvey comes in at low on the totem pole, $8 price. So I went smiling to Sam with my $8. And I put him on both my teams. So
I remember.
I'm hoping for a miracle.
Yeah, when we had him on our show, he was with some Canadian league, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And then he got on the Ultimate Fighter shortly thereafter he'd been on our show.
Yep. And he came back.
And I remember his fight with yeah.
He's a good dude. We got to get him on again. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that. But Alex Oliveira. Before that, we got to mention this fight because this is one of my picks. He is 22-8-1. They call him the Brazilian Cowboy. He's fighting a guy who's undefeated, Shavkat Rakhmonov, 12-0. Now, it is one of those, not really proven in the UFC, 12-0 records. But this guy not only has a shirt dog picture, but he's like screaming in the shirt dog picture. So I had to go with him as a cheap option. I don't know if he's going to win, but again, as a 12-0 fighter, I don't think he's going to get knocked out. It'll at least go the distance. So I'm hoping for a miracle on that one. That experience is more so too much rough experience rather than dominant experience. So who knows? Rachmanov could be a flash in the pan.
He's 12-0, and what nationality is he, Rich?
Rachmanov, geez, I don't know. He looks like Asian and Russian. Middle Eastern, maybe.
I just wonder where these fights took. Yeah, I wonder where these fights took place at.
Okay, let me check here.
That would be.
I'm looking at his record. KZMMAF was where most of them happened. He was also in the M1 challenge, so yeah, that's Russia. M1 challenges, a couple of those. He's got a lot of submissions. A lot of KOs and TKOs. A lot of first round finishes.
So KZ, that would be one of those stands probably, huh?
Kazakhstan.
Like Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan.
Right.
Anything will stand. That's my rule. It's not a cheap date. Anything will stand. So the stand man, well, so he's one of the cheaper ones on there, huh?
Yeah. Kind of mid-range. Anyway, so we got the Sam Alvey fight. Then we got the first 3 fights. Casey Kenny, 15-2-1. He was fairly cheap. I think he was a $15 or $16 buy. I went with him over Nathaniel Wood, who's 17-4. Casey's 15-2-1. Just he's a little bit favored. I think Wood is down there in the $9-10 range. So I think that was a solid pick. And then we got Liana Jojua and Miranda Maverick. Again, I didn't want to go with either one of these girls. They got a pretty close record. Maverick is 7-2. Jojua is 8-3. So I went with experience in the first fight of the night. Joel Alvarez comes in at 17-2. And he's fought some decent UFC fights, but nowhere near the experience of Yakovlev, even though he's had some losing efforts of late. I think Joel Alvarez is right up his alley. A young kid, he can expose, maybe get an early submission, or just outpace him through the fight using his experience, and just stay away from the knockout.
Yep. So So you have to hope it's going to be one of those, son, there are levels to this game.
Yeah.
And not a pass the torch.
Right. But I think I have a better shot on the FanDuel, on the UFC FanDuel than I do on the NFL, because, boy, that has been very hard to predict lately. Tony told me not even to worry about this one guy who started out tonight on the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a guy that has history with them, but he was like, oh, it's only a matter of time before he gets hurt, So I left him off all my lineups. Sure enough, first, 3 snaps, they go to him. I'm like, oh, man. Should have picked him. Yeah, it's so hard to predict that stuff. It's a little bit easier when you have fight experience.
I haven't been watching the NFL at all this year, but there was a funny quote, and there's a lot of things that only happen in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Things that you would never believe would happen anywhere else. Like last year, if you remember the infamous Myles Garrett attack with the helmet.
Oh, yeah.
The flying helmet.
Vicious.
Now, since Cleveland has been back in 1999, well, they're still an expansion team, in essence. And that's another twilight zone. The world's longest expansion team. They've beat Pittsburgh maybe 3 times in 20 years. And that game last year, where they beat their what used to be a rivalry. It's not really a rivalry anymore. It's like big brother and little brother. But with Ben Roethlisberger not playing, somehow Cleveland pulled the upset off and turned it into something that felt like a loss.
Right.
Well, now, fast forward to this year. Now, as Bill Belichick would say, you're as good as your record. Well, Cleveland started off just May by Baltimore, but then they put 4 wins together. And then I guess last Sunday, I've been watching the Untouchables television, so they're showing reruns on this weird channel. They win. I'm on Elliott Ness's team, so it was 8-0 for my team. But it was embarrassing. It was just embarrassing. See, I'm not a football guy. I don't know what the snap count is, but supposedly Baker Mayfield can't get the snap count right for a third-year starting quarterback. And this Watt guy, JJ's younger brother, TJ.
Oh, yeah.
They were showing some films of this. And he knew when the ball was going to be snapped. Now imagine, if you're trying to block him, you're the right tackle. That's bad enough. If he's not knowing when the ball's going to be snapped, it was just a disaster. So here's my point. 4-2 is not bad. Okay? Especially for a terrible, the laughing stock of the NFL.
Oh, yeah. What a comeback.
So 4-2 is respectable, but there's a ton of questions on Baker Mayfield. And from what someone who knows this stuff more than me was saying, there's only been 2 teams in the history of the NFL that have won a Super Bowl without an all-star quarterback.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the ones that he said, but the quarterback is everything.
Exactly.
And it looks like they may have got it wrong. So they're interviewing Mayfield, and I'm just wondering if he's just shot mentally because he said, we're 4-2, but it feels like 0-6. Only in Cleveland would you hear that. Because think of this. Guys that come to the NFL are winners. If they're used to winning. They probably won when they started playing the game in junior varsity. And then they won in high school. And then they got their scholarship. And then a lot of them were Division I All-Americans in college. Winners. And then they come to Cleveland. And they're in the state of shock. Again, and I just thought of that. I'm so glad I've got Elliott. And then Superman's on before Elliott Ness, too. So Superman usually has to come from behind, but he saves the day. So, it's so nice to have a winning team, Oh, my God.
Well, you guys got some talent. Odell Beckham is capable of a great game if he's against, a little bit lesser defense. So it's been an interesting year. I mean, certain teams have had such crazy performances, like, Miami sometimes pulls out a great game.
Rich, I have virus fatigue, riot fatigue, elections, so much fatigue at this stuff. Because I guess, and I'm not watching. The mic just went off, and I only so much internet, but I do follow the news, and they had to, they got rid of the third string quarterback. I guess he was on. When I was a kid, they used to call it the taxi squad. That these guys would keep hotels downtown, and then he needed a third string guy was a free agent, so he went somewhere else. So they only had two quarterbacks, and so they signed a third one. But the problem is when they went to Pittsburgh, and Mayfield was taken out. He was just the referee had to stop the fight. I guess he was just maimed. Then they put in this Tease Tatum guy. But if Tease Tatum would have been hurt, they wouldn't have had a third quarterback because of the COVID protocols. I guess you have to be. Again, I don't know. This news cycle's driving me nuts. But again, some of this only in Cleveland, so it's still kind of fun to just to read the news about it. But as far as an emotional commitment, it's
a whole new NFL.
Wow, it is
different.
What it is.
Very different this year.
So it's been a weird year. But all right, well, I guess that wraps.
I do have a homework assignment for you, Tom. Before we leave, I got to give you homework. Next week we have a guest, and his name is Phil Lanides, and he has a new podcast himself about the Strike Force days. So you need you to do a little Strike Force research, and so I can be.
Okay, yeah, that'll be fun.
I don't have to be the only one asking questions.
Okay, cool.
So he's a Strike Force expert.
Now, what is his name again, Phil?
Phil Lanides, Lanides.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's coming on next Thursday.
That'll be kind of fun taking a trip back in time. So
yeah.
Cool, buddy.
He had an interesting interview with Joe Riggs that I listened to. And the only question he didn't ask was about the shotgun injury. That would have been what I would ask. You know, how do you come back from that? Where he almost blew his whole hand off with a shotgun while he was cleaning it.
You know, speaking of Joe Riggs, did you ever, and I confess to watching this a couple times, did you ever see the animation?
Oh, yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, he got to the bottom of that. That's why I listened to it. He did get to the bottom of that episode and got Joe Riggs' take on the whole thing. And, of course, that's the most entertaining part of the interview, but, you know, I'll send you the link before the show. You can listen to a couple of them. Just
the drawings. You know, when they had the trouble in the hotel lobby, and they started getting in the bathroom. I don't know who put that.
Joe Riggs says in the interview with Phil, he's like, I still hate that guy. Yeah, he's like the only person in MMA that I hate.
Well, if you ever are really bored, which you're probably not, I don't have enough time in the day, but if you ever just go on YouTube and start Googling it, because the Diaz brothers have a lot. Someone really did a lot of cartoons on the. Well, they're not anime cartoons, I guess.
Yeah.
They did a lot of cartoons on the Diaz brothers, and they're just hilarious. I mean, if I'm going to waste time, hey, that's kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
All right, Chad. I will be loaded for bear with Strike Force next week. This will be fun.
All right.
Cool.
We'll talk later, Tom.
All right, bud. Enjoy again. Okay. Bye.
Thanks.